Hey, I want to thank you for being a part of the conversation. Let's do some pod crashing. Episode number 322 is with Ray Trapani and Jonny Be Good from the podcast Creating a Con, the story of Bitconned. Good morning, you two. How are you doing today?
Morning. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I want to start things off by, I think that we are still in this lost world when it comes to what a Bitcoin is. And it's because, only a few people understand it. My financial guy says, the hell you're going to go that direction. We're not going that way. And yet now we've got Bitcoin. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, so to feed off of that, I think Bitcoin is actually pretty safe in a way, as much as it goes up and down so fast. But as far as the other ones, that's where it kind of gets into murky waters, I think.
Yeah.
The other cryptocurrencies. But Bitcoin, Ethereum, and what that is just essentially very similar to modern day banking, where everything's just on the computer, right? Everything's numbers on a screen anyways. Not that many people. I know me personally, I don't walk around with any cash. I just use my phone and I click it against the machine, and that's how I pay.
What drew you to this story? Because, to pull off a podcast, first of all, there's no way that you did this podcast in sitting down one shot and all of a sudden you've got all these episodes. You guys have been on this story for a while.
Yeah. So Ray and I actually have been working on this for a long time. The whole idea originally started as a book idea, and we actually sat down and wrote out the entire thing. And weirdly enough, we ended up getting podcast interest and some interest from Netflix before anything really happened. But there's just so much to this story that even the documentary doesn't touch on, that we kind of flesh out more in the podcast. A lot of Ray's upbringing and things kind of influenced what he did, and it's kind of like the modern American dream. Mm-hmm. There's no more like working hard for the house, white picket fence type things. Now, it seems like it's either exploit or get left behind.
It's interesting that you bring up the American dream, because that was absolutely one of my questions today, was that, is the Bitcoin still the American dream like it was 3 to 5 years ago, or are we going to sink all that energy into trying to win the lottery?
I think it's still going to go up a little bit, and I think it's a good store value, but I don't think it's as much as it's not going to go up as much percent as it has in the past, right? Like, people are definitely behind if they're just getting in, but there is value in being able to just send people anywhere in the world money at any time.
I think one of the attractions to this, when I first learned about how DJ Khaled and even Floyd Mayweather got involved in this, it was like, oh my God, I remember NFL players and NBA players, their entire new contracts were all based on Bitcoin.
Yeah, for sure. At the time, especially in 2017, no one had got in trouble for promoting any of these companies. So the amounts of money we were able to pay them was just so much more than a typical promotion. So to be able to give someone $1 million like that, like it was nothing, Floyd Mayweather was happy to do it. He had to make a few posts on his Instagram, when I think other companies to do an actual product would probably only give him a few $100,000. So there was just a vast difference in the amount that we can give them. So they were all just jumping on the bandwagons and just promoting whatever they got, a chance to.
One of the things that you expose inside this podcast, which is called Creating a Con, the thing is that you talk about this as a new age of crime. New age of crime, that tells me that we have experts that were just learning as they went along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even now, cryptocurrency, in my opinion, is worse than it was. Now everybody just creates basically nothing and just promotes it to be able to gain financial freedom, and then they just rip off all the retail people. At least what we were doing, we were trying to build a product. Now it's crazy. The market is nuts.
Yeah, I saw a coin called Scam Coin. So, and people are buying it.
Building a company on an empty promise. That's the thing about it. You guys, the way that you sell things, you guys really could make things work.
Yeah, so I think marketing is everything, right? And that was the best thing we did as far as raising money, or the smartest thing we did is we took a lot of the initial few million that we raised and we just dumped it all into marketing. And from that, it just grew to tens and 20, upwards of $100 million at a couple points there. And, so I think marketing any sort of product is just, the key to success in business.
Do you think it's odd that it's still in the headlines where they're capturing the crooks, basically? Because, I mean, it's like it'll be on the front page for a while, and then it'll disappear, and then all of a sudden it'll come back, found guilty, going to prison, and then it's like, no, we should be talking about this all the time.
Yeah, and I also think like a lot of the crypto space doesn't want the regulation, right? So like
right.
the crypto space is very much like a player versus player or player versus everyone, and they kind of enjoy that battle. It's not for everybody, but the arrest, people are almost confused when they're arrested because they're like, wait, there was no written out regulation on this. And then like, they get involved and they're like, oh, and people are fighting back saying, we don't really even want the SEC involved. So it's a confusing one for sure.
Yeah, especially, I mean, in my own world, I mean, FDIC, okay, I'm fine. I'm protected. But, I mean, it's almost like a gigantic gamble, everything that you guys are investigating here and sharing the stories with.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. That's like why it's a weird story there where some people are like, I lost my life savings in Centra. And it's like, how? Like, why? Like, who would put their life savings into Centra? In my opinion, I think that's crazy.
Right. Yeah, it's like, now what have you guys learned from doing this podcast? Because I've never heard anything like this. You've got to be walking into these stories going, I don't know what we're going to get, but when we get it, we're going to know it.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, I mean, I've known Ray my entire life. I've been best friends with him since 3rd or 4th grade. And I've kind of, I've known when to ask Ray questions and when not to, and mind you, a lot of the things Ray was involved in, Ray was addicted to drugs and he was dealing drugs. So that's within the realm of possibility. Like it's not the biggest jump to see that in my head. But all of a sudden, when I see the New York Times is writing articles about him and I know that he doesn't have any background in financial markets, that's what kind of generated my interest. What I learned throughout talking to him is that because of all the things he's done throughout his life, Ray has a phenomenal knowledge of how systems work, and it's the reason he's been able to be successful is to kind of see these systems and understand where the exploits lie, which was fascinating to me.
Do you have like inside jokes in the way that, when you hear of somebody that's just starting up a Bitcoin? I mean, I even kind of joked around about it when it came to Gene Simmons says he's creating one. And it's like, really, everybody seems to be getting into this market.
Yeah, I just basically say they're all scams, right? Like they're only doing it to try to make money off retail investors.
Yeah.
Very few people are going to make money off of it besides the person creating it.
Yeah. And the thing is that with this podcast, first of all, I got to give you guys a compliment on this, and that you are what I listen to when I'm in the car, and the way that you guys share the story, it's like you're not playing smarter than me. You're saying, I know you don't understand this all the way, but I'm going to help you along the way by explaining it to you. So I love the way that you're one-on-one with your listeners.
Yeah, a big thing I think that kind of sets the podcast aside from others in this space is the fact that it's coming. We've been best friends forever, and we took drastically different paths in life. And, I'm his biggest critic as well as his best friend. And I'm just trying to understand from his perspective what's going on. And just because of the rapport between us, the 20 plus years of friendship, Ray's very matter of fact when he's like, I don't know what the heck we're talking about, or this is exactly what's happening.
When the FBI comes knocking on your door, I mean, we all have that fear because we all think, oh God, I did something wrong. Here comes the FBI. I mean, I can't imagine how fast your heart stopped.
Yeah, that was a crazy thing. I was laying there naked in my bed with my girlfriend at the time, and I heard, like, I always had, hundreds of thousands of dollars just laying around in my house. So I hear that, and I grab my gun because at the time I lived in Florida. I had my license, whatever. But I'm like, oh shit, someone's trying to rob me. And from there, I just basically hear FBI. I'm like, all right, let me put this down. And I go into the door, and they were nice enough to let me put on some clothes.
In a really weird way, the way that you describe that, it's like I'm watching Scarface all over again. So, I mean, in a weird way, was the Bitcoin and making so much money all at once, was it like Scarface?
It was a crazy time for sure. A lot of drugs involved. I lived in Miami. I was before this company. I had an exotic car rental business, so I had all the cars you can imagine: Ferraris, Lamborghinis. So, my life very much was movie-esque.
Yeah. well, then what's stopping you from turning it into a movie now, or can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, we're finishing up a book that we're trying to get out and trying to get published, and then from there, 100%, that would be the goal, to sell it and get the movie rights sold, and we just want to make sure it's with the right production company.
I'm glad you said the book, and the reason being is because if you go back and you study what podcasting is and how it started, it was always the authors that wanted to be heard, and so therefore that's where podcasting really got its first step. It wasn't the comedians or anything like that. So I'm so proud of you for doing the writing, doing the podcasting. Now let's grow this picture.
Yeah, and it's funny how things ended up happening, because Ray and I actually got together and wrote we pretty much wrote the entire book out. And based on the proposal for the book is actually how we got interest in the podcast and all that. So the podcast is actually a lot more similar to the tone of the book than, let's say, like the documentary is. I would say the book's a little darker and more raunchy.
Now, the way you put the podcast first. So now, how's that change your speaking style with the book then? Because I mean, you guys are so one-on-one on the podcast. What is that doing to your writing?
So I mean, the book's gone through like several evolutions as of now. But to be honest, it hasn't really, if anything, it's informed my writing, because it's still very different, right? There's still certain ways I can't say things on the podcast that I can say in my own book. The podcast also was written by Ben Fetterman, who we work very closely. We wrote a lot together. But in the same time, it's a collaborative effort between the two of us. And so the book is much more just me, and I'm able to say whatever I want, and Ray is taking me through. It's almost like Dante's descent through hell, kind of. So the podcast very much helps in the book writing.
When you have a story like this, and I've always believed that your past really is only based upon a true story, how do you know what truth is, even though, because you were bending the truth to create a truth, so what is the truth and what are you living by? That was a lawyer's question.
To break down that question.
That was like a lawyer, wasn't it? I've been watching too much court TV.
I think I kind of, first of all, Ray's truth, you have to understand, for like the first third of this, there's a lot of Xanax involved, so the truth is already going to be a little fuzzy. But the truth lies somewhere in between all of these stories, right?
Yeah.
Because our own memories are fickle. You can believe something's the truth, but it happened differently. That's the nature of having a brain. So it's kind of it's for the audience to kind of decide, but I will say that there's no denying how authentic Ray is and how he's very much letting you know what he's doing and what he's thinking, and that comes across.
And
that means you're a better listener then.
Who, me?
Yeah, because when you're sitting there and you're sharing that story, it's like going, oh my God, he really, when Ray is talking, it's like, I better listen, because if I miss out on something, I missed out a big part of what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, plus I don't want to miss the little nuggets of financial advice in there,
Yeah, and what people need to realize is that I was cooperating, right? So I admitted guilt to every crime I ever committed in my entire life. So I was already tried for those cases. So there's nothing that I had to hide when I was telling this story. So I was full open book. And while I was writing this book with Jonny, I was also cooperating with the FBI. And when you cooperate with the FBI and the government, they basically say to you, if you lie once, you're going to lose your cooperation agreement. So I was just such like a flowing open book with both sides of that it just helped the writing go through and get the most truth out of the story as you possibly could.
In a really weird way, Ray, I got to ask you this question. When you were in that courtroom, did you feel like that you were the teacher, the educator? Because, once again, the SEC and the FBI were still virgins to this kind of stuff. You brought the experience of what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. That's exactly how I felt. The SEC didn't really even have much to say. They were always asking questions to try to learn. And then even like one of the head prosecutors, now they retired after this case, and now they're basically a private lawyer for cryptocurrency. And this was his only cryptocurrency case that he ever tried.
Yeah. Do you find yourself growing beyond this podcast? Because, most podcasters don't just settle for one. Will you create a podcast that really educates the listener 100% so they too can invest, or do you want people to go in that direction?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's one of our goals. This where I'm recording this from right now. I'm planning on building a studio and continuing on speaking on all these different matters.
Yeah. So now the big question is that when you find yourself in that position, did you fear that you were going to be put in a place where you were never going to come out of?
For a little bit there, but I'm always pretty good at compartmentalizing, the actual 100+ years that I was facing, and just kind of I got married, I had kids throughout that time, and I was cooperating. So I would speak it into existence that I was going to get no time. I was telling Jonny years and years ago, and everybody that knew me, I was telling them I wasn't going to get any time.
And not for nothing, but just like Ray is a honorary lawyer. He's been in and out of this legal system so much throughout his whole life that he actually, but truly, like, he knows what they're thinking because he's been through it so many times. So when he was sentenced with the big number, it's like 100 and something years, he immediately kind of like was like, they have to do that to scare you, but really it's just, I don't know. That was another thing that I found fascinating, was how, he just had this knowledge of the legal system that most of us do not.
Wow. It's almost like, Ray, that you have lived this life before and you knew the outcome of this story before it even happened.
Yeah, second coming.
So then what is the journey all about then? Because, I mean, it's like I see a hero here, and at the same time I see somebody that was basically just a novice at it, and something grew from it. I mean, there are so many different edges to both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of moral stories that come out throughout this story. As far as context adding to situations too, like it's really fleshed out in the podcast. So I think, you have a true crime story, but you also hear the insight into the different parts of my life that built me into what I became. And, now my life has completely changed, right? I'm sober 6 years and doing better and telling the story, trying to, kind of guide people away from doing what I did. But I think the podcast really breaks all that down.
That's so funny that you say a true crime story when in reality I feel like that I'm in financial class. That it's like, okay, here's the good, here's the bad. You've learned something. You didn't get this from a book. You got this from a human being.
I keep labeling it, and I always keep coming back to, like, it's just it's like a true like modern American story. Yeah. In almost like every sense of the word, to even from like our capitalist culture to who we like admire as where we grew up in Atlantic Beach, New York. There was a poster in the Village Hall when you went to go get whatever you needed from the Village Hall. It was a signed poster of all the Sopranos. So that should let you know exactly where everyone's loyalties kind of lie, in the Village Hall of Atlantic Beach. But that's common, everyone, likes Tony Soprano. So
history itself, how do you think it's going to play out here? Because, I mean, the two of you, I mean, are you're still very young at age, and it's like, I mean, you guys have business knowledge. Are you going to go on a speaking tour? What are you going to do with this knowledge?
We definitely want to finish up the book, get that book out there, try to work it into a movie deal, obviously, and then I would love to get a podcast going. That would, especially just like to really break down all the different contexts, even in everything could be more fleshed out, and there's just so much more when you have a story like this. Like I think our opinions on different things are different than the average person's opinion. So I think people would like to hear those opinions, when we would be interviewing other people or whatever we'd be talking about.
But Ray, is there a side of your heart that would love to go back to the Miami area and talk to the real people, not the people that are making the money now, but those that are struggling? You can say, look, I can help show you the way. I can put you in a place where you're going to have some financial security.
It's a weird one. I think like people who did crimes and then they go into the coaching area of things is kind of weird. It's what Belfort's doing, right? Teaching people about sales. And a big part of it is to be like financially free. It takes some, I don't know what the word, like you have to have kind of different morals than a lot of people do. And that's where it becomes weird to pitch people on like how to be good salesmen, is because you have to be able to just lie to people. And it's kind of like a messed up way of life. So like I kind of go back and forth on that topic of like what I should do next in that area. I more so rather educate people against, the bad things and on what I think is good in life.
Yeah, yeah. You guys have got to come back to the show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
I appreciate
All right,
it.
yeah, we had a great time.
Excellent. Will you guys be brilliant today, okay?
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.